When my daughter looked me dead in the eye and said I was getting too old to handle my own money, I knew she would finally show her true colors. What she didn't know was that I would been keeping records of every penny she would stolen. And I was about to teach her that underestimating a woman like me was the biggest mistake of her life. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy stories about family drama and justice. And please, share in the comments below. What is the most important lesson you have learned about trusting family with money? I would love to hear your thoughts. I never thought I would be the kind of mother who would have to hide her checkbook from her own child, but there I was. 3 months after my hip replacement surgery, watching my daughter Sarah riffle through my desk drawers. Like she owned the place, she was supposed to be helping me organize my bills while I recovered. Instead, she was hunting through my financial papers with the kind of determination I would only seen when she was 16, and searching for her car keys after missing curfew. The surgery had been rough on me. Dr. Patterson warned me I would need at least 8 weeks of limited mobility, which meant I couldn't drive, couldn't handle the stairs easily, and definitely couldn't manage my usual routine of running errands and paying bills in person like I would done for 47 years. Sarah had immediately volunteered to help. "Mom, don't worry about anything," she would said, that sweet voice she used whenever she wanted something. "Rick and I will take care of everything. You just focus on healing." At first, I was grateful. Sarah lived just 20 minutes away with her husband Rick, and their youngest had finally graduated high school, so she had time on her hands. She would come over every Tuesday and Friday, armed with her laptop and a stack of organizing folders, claiming she was modernizing my financial system. She set up online banking, took over my bill paying, and insisted on having my Social Security and pension checks deposited directly into an account she could monitor. "It is just easier this way, Mom," she would explain whenever I asked questions. "You don't need to worry about due dates or late fees. I have got it all under control," but something felt wrong from the beginning. The way she would quickly shuffle papers when I walked into the room. How she would change the subject whenever I asked about specific bills. The fact that she never seemed to have any questions about what I owed or when things were due, like she already knew the answers. It was my neighbor, Helen, who first planted the seed of suspicion. She would stop by one afternoon while Sarah was there and mentioned that she would seen Rick driving a brand new pickup truck, must be doing well at the dealership. Helen had said innocently, "That is quite an upgrade from his old Ford." I would looked at Sarah, confused. "I thought Rick said business was slow. Wasn't that why you needed to borrow money for Emma's graduation party?" Sarah had laughed it off. "Oh, he got a promotion. I forgot to mention it. You know how men are about their trucks." But her laugh sounded hollow, forced, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in my chest. I would loaned Sarah $3,000, just 2 months earlier. Money I would scrape together from my emergency fund because she claimed they were behind on their mortgage due to Rick's reduced hours. But if he would gotten a promotion, if he was buying new trucks, where had my money really gone? The next morning, I called the bank, just to check my balance. I told myself, just to see how much Sarah had been spending on my bills. What I heard made my stomach drop to the floor. "Mrs. Williams, your checking account balance is currently $437, the customer service representative said cheerfully. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" $400. I would had nearly $8,000 in that account before my surgery. My monthly expenses shouldn't have been more than $2,000 at most. I hung up the phone with shaking hands and immediately called back, requesting a detailed statement for the past 3 months. When the papers arrived 2 days later, I spread them across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. And that is exactly what they were. Evidence of a crime committed by my own daughter against her disabled mother. There were withdrawals I would never authorized. Checks written to cash for amounts that made no sense. A transfer of $6,000 to an account I didn't recognize. Online purchases from stores I would never heard of, But the worst part wasn't the money itself. It was the dates. Sarah had started stealing from me the day after my surgery, while I was still groggy from anesthesia, and couldn't even walk to the bathroom without help. She would use my vulnerability, my trust, my complete dependence on her as an opportunity to rob me blind. I called Sarah immediately, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "I need you to come over now. We need to talk." She arrived an hour later with her usual cheery demeanor, carrying a coffee and a bag of muffins, like she was visiting a friend instead of facing her victim. "How are you feeling today, Mom? You sounded upset on the phone." I slid the bank statements across the table. "Explain these." Her face went white as she scanned the papers. For a moment, just a moment, I saw genuine panic in her eyes. Then she shifted into damage control mode, the same way she would done as a teenager when caught lying about where she would been. "Mom, you are confused. These are all legitimate expenses. Medical bills, house repairs, things you asked me to take care of. I asked you to steal $6,000 from my account. I asked you to write checks to cash that you never told me about." "You are not thinking clearly," she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone that made my skin crawl. "The pain medication has you all mixed up. This is exactly why I needed to take over your finances. You cannot keep track of things anymore." That is when I knew she would crossed a line she could never uncross. She wasn't just stealing from me, she was gaslighting me, trying to make me believe that my own mind was failing, so she could justify treating me like a child who couldn't manage her own life. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, don't be dramatic. Let's just sit down and get out of my house now. And give me back my checkbook, my credit cards, and every piece of financial paperwork you have taken." Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. "You are being ridiculous. I am trying to help you, and you are treating me like a criminal." "Fine, handle everything yourself. See how well that works out when you forget to pay your electric bill and they shut off your power." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. But I wasn't done. "Sarah, the checkbook." She turned back, her face twisted with an ugly expression I would never seen before. "You know what? You are right. You don't need help. You are obviously capable of taking care of yourself. So, take care of yourself. Don't call me when you cannot remember what day it is or when you fall down these stairs because you are too stubborn to ask for help." She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, and I sat there in the sudden silence, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's betrayal, and realized that the little girl I would raised, the one I would sacrificed everything for, was gone. In her place was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with failing security. But she would made one crucial mistake. She assumed that because I was elderly, because I was recovering from surgery, because I would always been soft, spoken, and trusting, that I was helpless. She thought I would quietly accept her version of reality and be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity she left me. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The first thing I did after Sarah left was change all my passwords. Bank accounts, credit cards, even my email. I wasn't taking any chances that she still had access to anything in my life. Then I called my longtime friend Patricia, who had worked as a legal secretary for 30 years before retiring. "Patty, I need a lawyer," I said without preamble, when she answered the phone. "A good one. Someone who knows about financial elder abuse." Patricia didn't ask questions. She just said, "I will make some calls. Can you be ready to meet with someone tomorrow morning?" The lawyer's name was David Chen, and he looked younger than my grandson. But his eyes were sharp and his questions were precise. I showed him the bank statements, told him about Sarah's gaslighting, explained about the unauthorized withdrawals and transfers. "Mrs. Williams, this is a clear case of financial elder abuse," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The fact that it began immediately after your surgery, while you were incapacitated, makes it even more serious. We can pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means your daughter could face jail time. and you can sue her for every penny she stole, plus damages for emotional distress. The question is, how far do you want to take this? I thought about Sarah's face when she would call me confused and dramatic, about the way she would twisted my legitimate concerns into signs of mental decline, about how she would use my physical vulnerability as an opportunity to rob me. As far as the law allows, I said. David nodded. I will need you to file a police report first, then we will start gathering documentation. Do you have access to any other financial records? Previous statements, tax returns, anything that shows your normal spending patterns? I smiled grimly. Mr. Chen, I have been keeping detailed financial records since 1978. I have everything. Over the next week, I gathered 47 years' worth of financial documentation. Every bank statement, every tax return, every major purchase receipt. I created a timeline of my spending patterns that proved beyond doubt that the withdrawals Sarah had made were completely outside my normal behavior. I also did something else. I started making phone calls. First, I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. Lynn, I need to tell you something about Sarah, and I need you to not interrupt until I am finished. I told her everything. The theft, the gaslighting, the way Sarah had exploited my surgery recovery. Linda was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, I have to tell you something. Last Christmas, when we were all together, Sarah asked me about your will. Specifically, she wanted to know if you had updated it recently and who you had named as executor. My blood ran cold. What did you tell her? I told her it wasn't any of her business. But now I am wondering, do you think she has been planning this for a while? I thought about it. Sarah's sudden interest in helping with my finances, her insistence on setting up online banking, the way she would volunteered so quickly when I needed surgery support. I think she saw my hip replacement as an opportunity, I said. She probably figured she would have months of access to my accounts while I was helpless. The little witch, Linda muttered. What are you going to do? I am going to teach her that stealing from your mother has consequences. Next, I called my eldest grandson, Michael. He was 28, worked in it, and had always been my most level-headed grandchild. I told him what his mother had done, watching his face change from confusion to disbelief to anger over FaceTime. Grandma, are you sure? I mean, Mom can be difficult, but stealing from you. That is, he trailed off, shaking his head. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has your mother said anything about my mental state? About me being confused or forgetful? His face darkened. She mentioned that you had been having some memory issues since your surgery, said the pain medication was affecting your thinking. But you seem fine to me, sharp, as always. She has been setting up a narrative, I said, preparing everyone to believe that I am incompetent. So when I accuse her of theft, people will think I am just confused. Michael was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me, Grandma? I need you to document every conversation you have with your mother about me. Write down exactly what she says and when. If this goes to court, I am going to need witnesses who can testify about her attempts to undermine my credibility. Consider it done. The police report was filed on a Tuesday morning. Officer Martinez was professional and thorough, taking detailed notes as I explained the timeline of events. When I showed her the bank statements, her expression grew grim. Madam, I have to ask, are you currently experiencing any cognitive difficulties? Memory problems? Confusion? Anything like that? I am going to give you the same test I gave my lawyer, I said. Ask me about any transaction on these statements, any date, any amount. I can tell you exactly what it was supposed to be for and why it is wrong. She spent 20 minutes quizzing me on details, payment dates, vendor names, typical monthly expenses. I answered every question correctly, often providing more information than she would ask for. Mrs. Williams, you clearly have a better handle on your finances than most people half your age, she said finally. I will forward this to the Financial Crimes Unit. Someone will be in touch within 48 hours that afternoon. I did something I would been putting off. I called Emma, Sarah's youngest daughter, who had just started college. Emma had always been close to me, and I knew this situation would hurt her. But she deserved to know the truth. Grandma. She answered cheerfully. How are you feeling? Mom said you have been having a rough time with your recovery. Emma, sweetheart, I need to tell you something difficult about your mother. Can you sit down? I told her everything, gently but honestly. I watched her face crumble as she processed what I was saying. But why would she do that? Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. You gave her money for my graduation party. You have always helped us when we needed it. I don't know, honey, but I need you to understand that this isn't your fault, and it doesn't change how I feel about you. You are still my granddaughter, and I love you just as much as I always have. What is going to happen to her? That depends on what the police and the courts decide. But Emma, I want you to know that if you need anything for school, textbooks, meal money, anything, you call me directly. This situation between your mother and me doesn't affect my commitment to helping you get your education. She cried harder. I cannot believe she did this to you, while you were hurt and couldn't defend yourself. That is so wrong, Grandma. It is wrong. And that is why I have to fight back. I cannot let her think this behavior is acceptable. 2 days later, Detective Rodriguez called. Mrs. Williams, we have reviewed your case with the district attorney's office. We are moving forward with charges of financial elder abuse and theft. We will need you to come in to give a formal statement. What kind of charges is my daughter looking at? Given the amount involved and the circumstances, we are looking at felony charges. If convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison and full restitution. 3 years. My daughter could go to prison for 3 years because she would decided to steal from her own mother. I should have felt sad. Instead, I felt relieved. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously. The formal statement took 2 hours. Detective Rodriguez was thorough, walking me through every transaction, every conversation, every attempt Sarah had made to gaslight me. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Williams, in 20 years of working financial crimes, I have seen a lot of cases like this. Adult children who think their elderly parents are easy targets, but I have rarely seen someone as prepared as you are. Your documentation is impeccable. I was a bookkeeper for 30 years before I retired, I said. Old habits die hard. Well, your old habits are going to put your daughter in prison. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Sarah's face when she would call me confused and dramatic, about the condescending tone she would use when trying to convince me I couldn't handle my own affairs, about the way she would exploited my physical vulnerability without a moment's hesitation. Detective, my daughter made her choice when she decided to steal from me while I was helpless. I am just making sure there are consequences for that choice. The arraignment was scheduled for the following Thursday. I didn't attend, but David Chen called me afterward with the details. She pleaded not guilty, as expected, he said. But Mrs. Williams, there is something you should know. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was acting as your financial caretaker and that you had given her permission for the transactions, even though I clearly never signed anything authorizing her to access those accounts. That is where your documentation proves invaluable. We have bank records showing that all the access permissions were set up after your surgery, when you were on pain medication. And your medical records confirm that you were heavily sedated for the first week post-surgery, so she cannot claim I was competent to give permission. Exactly. Plus, we have the testimony from your grandson about her attempts to portray you as mentally incompetent. It paints a clear picture of premeditation. That evening, Rick called me, Sarah's husband, who had always seemed like a decent man, despite his weak spine when it came to standing up to his wife. Dorothy, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice strained. Sarah doesn't know I am calling. What is it, Rick? She has been spiraling since the arrest, ranting about how you are destroying the family, how you are being vindictive and cruel. But Dorothy, I need you to know that I had no idea what she was doing. I believe you, I said, and I did. Rick was weak, but he wasn't dishonest. She told me the money you gave us was a gift. Said you wanted to help with Emma's party and some of our bills. I never knew she was just taking it. What are you going to do, Rick? He was quiet for a long moment. I am filing for divorce. I cannot be married to someone who would steal from her own mother while she was recovering from surgery. That is not the woman I thought I married. I wasn't surprised. Rick came from a family where honesty and integrity mattered. This kind of betrayal would be unforgivable to him. I am sorry, Rick. I know this is hard on you and the kids. Don't apologize. You are the victim here. Sarah did this to herself. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the home I would lived in for 42 years, the place where I would raised Sarah, where I would nursed her through chickenpox and helped her with homework and celebrated every milestone. Where had I gone wrong? How had I raised a daughter who could look at her injured mother and see nothing but an opportunity for profit? But then I thought about Emma, crying on the phone because she couldn't believe her mother would do such a thing. About Michael immediately offering to help document Sarah's lies. About Rick choosing to leave his wife rather than enable her behavior. Maybe I hadn't failed as a mother. Maybe I would just learned that some people choose to become something other than what they were raised to be. And maybe the most important thing I could do now was show my other family members that actions have consequences, even when they come from someone you love. The civil lawsuit moved faster than the criminal case. David Chen filed for full restitution plus damages, and Sarah's lawyer immediately tried to negotiate a settlement. They want to settle for half the stolen amount, David told me during one of our weekly calls. No admission of guilt, no damages for emotional distress. Absolutely not, I said. She took every penny while I was helpless. I want every penny back, plus interest, plus compensation for what she put me through. It might mean going to trial. Are you prepared for that, Mr. Chen? I am 78 years old. I have been through a depression, 3 recessions, the death of my husband, and major surgery. I think I can handle a courtroom. The trial was set for 6 months out, but the criminal case moved to a plea hearing first. Sarah's attorney had clearly advised her that fighting the charges was pointless given the evidence against her. She pleaded guilty to felony financial elder abuse in exchange for 18 months in prison and full restitution. When David called me with the news, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that it was over, sadness that it had come to this. But mostly, I felt vindicated. The justice system had confirmed what I knew. What Sarah had done was serious, criminal, and worthy of significant punishment. She will also have a felony conviction on her record permanently, David explained. That will affect her ability to get certain jobs, to get credit, to rent apartments. The consequences will follow her for the rest of her life. Good, I thought, but didn't say. Maybe permanent consequences would prevent her from doing this to someone else. The day Sarah was sentenced, I sat in my garden tending to the tomatoes I would planted after my hip had fully healed. The physical therapy had worked better than expected, and I was more mobile now than I would been in years. Emma stopped by after her classes, like she did every Tuesday now. The sentencing was today, wasn't it? She asked quietly, settling into the chair next to mine. Yes, 18 months. Emma was quiet for a while, pulling weeds from the flower bed absently. I visited her last week, she said finally. How is she? Angry. She is still insisting she was trying to help you, that you are being cruel and vindictive. She said you are destroying the family over money. I set down my gardening shears and looked at my granddaughter. Emma, do you think I am being cruel? She met my eyes directly. No, Grandma, I think you are being strong. Mom stole from you when you couldn't defend yourself. That is unforgivable, and the fact that she still cannot admit it was wrong just proves you made the right choice. It doesn't make you hate me? Seeing your mother go to prison? Emma shook her head. It makes me respect you more. You could have just stayed quiet and let her get away with it. Most people would have, especially with their own kid. But you showed everyone that there are consequences for treating people badly, even family. That night, I made dinner for one. Grilled chicken and vegetables from my garden, and ate it on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, I felt truly peaceful. My phone rang around 8. It was Linda, calling for our weekly check. "How are you doing, sis?" she asked. "Today was the big day, right?" It was. "And I am doing well. Better than well." "Actually, any regrets?" I thought about it. I regret that it came to this. I regret that Sarah made the choices she made, but I don't regret holding her accountable. Good for you. I have been thinking about what happened, and I keep coming back to one thing. Sarah thought you were weak because you were old and hurt. She thought she could take advantage of you because you had always been the peacekeeper in the family. She was wrong. She was very wrong. And I think every elderly person who hears this story is going to feel a little bit safer, knowing that you proved we don't have to be victims just because we are older. After we hung up, I pulled out the journal I would started keeping during the whole ordeal, not because David had recommended it for legal purposes, but because I would needed somewhere to process everything that had happened. I flipped back to the early entries, written in the angry, desperate handwriting of a woman who had just discovered her own daughter was stealing from her. The confusion, the self-doubt, the fear that maybe I really was losing my mental faculties. Then I read the later entries, written in steadier script as I would gathered evidence and built my case. The growing confidence as I realized I wasn't crazy or helpless. The determination as I would decided to fight back. And finally, I read the most recent entries, written in the calm, clear handwriting of a woman who had reclaimed her power and her dignity. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Today, Sarah was sentenced to 18 months in prison for stealing from me. I should feel sad, but mostly I feel free. Free from the gaslighting, from the manipulation, from the fear that I was losing my mind. I am not a victim. I am not helpless. I am a 78-year-old woman who knows her own worth and refuses to accept anything less than the respect I deserve." I closed the journal and looked around my kitchen. Everything was exactly as I liked it. My bills were paid, my accounts were secure, and my future was my own to decide. Tomorrow, I would start looking into those watercolor classes I would always wanted to take. Emma had mentioned wanting to learn pottery, and I thought we might take a class together. Rick had called to ask if I wanted to have dinner with him and the kids sometime soon. Now that the legal proceedings were over, life was moving forward. Not the life I would planned when I was recovering from surgery and thinking my daughter would help me through a difficult time, but a better life, a life where I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. Sarah had thought that being old made me vulnerable. She would thought that needing help made me helpless. She would thought that loving her unconditionally meant I would tolerate anything from her. She would been wrong on all counts, and now she had 18 months in prison to think about just how wrong she would been. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I smiled, not because my daughter was in prison, but because I would proven to myself and everyone else that Dorothy Williams was nobody's victim. Not at 78, not ever. And that was a lesson worth teaching, no matter how much it cost. 6 months into Sarah's sentence, I received an unexpected letter. Not from Sarah. I would made it clear through David Chen that I wasn't interested in any communication from her until she was ready to take full responsibility for what she had done. This letter was from a woman named Margaret Santos, whose return address showed she lived 2 towns over Dear Mrs. Williams. It began, "You don't know me, but I read about your case in the newspaper. I wanted to reach out because something very similar happened to me last year with my son and his wife. They were stealing from me while I was recovering from a stroke, and I was too embarrassed and confused to know what to do about it. Reading about how you fought back gave me the courage to contact a lawyer and file charges. I wanted you to know that your story helped me find my voice again." I set the letter down on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment. I would never thought about my case that way, as something that might inspire other people in similar situations. But Margaret's letter made me realize that what I would done had implications beyond just my own family. Over the following weeks, I received 4 more letters: an elderly man whose nephew had been forging checks, a woman whose daughter-in-law had stolen her Social Security benefits, a grandfather whose own son had taken out credit cards in his name. All of them had read about my case, and all of them had decided to fight back instead of staying silent. Emma brought it up during one of our Tuesday visits. "Grandma, did you know there is an article about you in the ARP magazine?" My roommate's grandmother saw it and called her all excited about this woman who stood up to her thieving daughter. I hadn't known about the article, but David had mentioned that a journalist had contacted him about writing a piece on financial elder abuse. Apparently, my case had become something of a poster child for fighting back against family exploitation. "Does that bother you?" Emma asked. "Having strangers know your business?" I considered it. "No, it doesn't bother me. If my experience helps other people realize they don't have to be victims, then maybe some good came out of all this ugliness." "You know what I think?" Emma said, repotting one of my African violets. "I think you are becoming famous for being a badass, Grandma." I laughed. I never thought of myself as a badass. "Well, you are. My friends at school all think you are incredibly cool. They cannot believe you put your own daughter in prison for stealing from you." "What do you tell them?" "I tell them that you are the strongest person I know, and that anyone who thinks elderly people are easy targets clearly never met Dorothy Williams." That evening, I called Patricia, who had been following the whole saga with the dedication of someone watching a particularly engaging soap opera. "Patty, I need to ask you something. Do you think I did the right thing?" "Really, honey? Why are you asking me that now? It has been over a year since this whole thing started. I have been getting letters from other people who were in similar situations. People who say my story inspired them to fight back. And I keep wondering, did I do this for the right reasons?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean? I mean, was I seeking justice, or was I just angry and looking for revenge? Because those are 2 different things. Do you remember what you said to me the very first day you called about getting a lawyer?" "No, not exactly," you said. "I need to make sure this never happens to anyone else." You weren't talking about getting your money back or punishing Sarah. You were talking about stopping a pattern of behavior. I did remember that now, the feeling that if I let Sarah get away with this, she would do it again. To me, to someone else, to whoever seemed vulnerable enough to exploit. "And look what has happened," Patricia continued. "You have inspired a bunch of other people to stand up for themselves. You have shown that elderly people don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from family. That is not revenge, honey. That is leadership." Leadership. I would never thought of myself as a leader, but maybe Patricia was right. Maybe by refusing to be a victim, I would show other people that they didn't have to be victims either. A year and a half after Sarah's sentencing, I received a phone call that I would been both expecting and dreading. Sarah was being released early for good behavior, and according to the terms of her plea agreement, she was required to pay me full restitution within 30 days of her release. David Chen had kept me updated on the financial aspects of the case. Sarah's conviction had cost her the marketing job she would held for 8 years. The felony on her record made finding new employment difficult. Rick's divorce had been finalized, and he would keep the house and custody of their youngest son. Emma had changed her last name and cut off contact with her mother entirely. Sarah had lost everything: her marriage, her family, her career, her reputation. And while I felt bad about the destruction, I didn't feel guilty. She would made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. The restitution check arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by certified mail, full payment of the stolen amount, plus interest, as required by the court. I deposited it, and then did something I would been planning for months. I wrote a check for $10,000 to the local senior center, specifically earmarked for their financial literacy and fraud prevention program. Then I wrote another check for $5,000 to Legal Aid to help fund their elder abuse advocacy services. Finally, I wrote a letter to Margaret Santos and the other people who had contacted me, telling them about the donation and encouraging them to consider supporting similar programs in their own communities. If we want to protect elderly people from financial abuse, I wrote, we need to do more than just prosecute the abusers. We need to educate potential victims and make sure they have access to legal help when they need it. 3 weeks after Sarah's release, Emma came to visit with news. Mom called me, she said without preamble. She wants to meet with you. I set down my coffee cup. What did you tell her? I told her that was up to you, but that she shouldn't expect anything from me. I am still not ready to have a relationship with her. What did she say? She said she understands that what she did was wrong, and she wants to apologize. But Grandma, I have to tell you. She sounded the same as always, like she was reading from a script her therapist gave her. I wasn't surprised. People like Sarah rarely experienced genuine remorse. They felt sorry for themselves. Sorry they got caught. Sorry they had to face consequences. But true regret for the harm they would caused. That was much rarer. I will think about it, I told Emma. But I am not making any promises. 2 days later, Sarah showed up at my door. She looked older, thinner, and her usual polished appearance had been replaced by the tired look of someone who had spent the last 18 months in a system designed to humble her. Hello, Mom, she said when I opened the door. Can we talk? I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine change, genuine remorse. What I saw was mostly fear. Fear that I wouldn't forgive her. Fear that she would permanently destroy her relationship with her mother. Fear that she would lost everything and couldn't get it back. You can come in, I said. But Sarah, before you say anything, I want you to understand something. I am not the same woman I was when this started. I will not be manipulated, gaslit, or taken advantage of. If you are here to offer genuine accountability and a real apology, we can talk. If you are here to make excuses or try to convince me that I overreacted, you can leave now. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you when you were vulnerable and needed help. I know I tried to make you think you were losing your mind when you started asking questions. And I know I have lost the right to call myself your daughter. It was a good start, but I needed more than words. Why did you do it, Sarah? Really, not the excuses you told yourself, but the real reason. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Because I felt entitled to it, she said finally. Rick and I were struggling financially, and I looked at your bank account and thought, she has got all this money, and she is old, and she doesn't need it like we do. I told myself I would pay it back eventually, but really, I just felt like I deserved it more than you did. It was the most honest thing she would said to me in years. Ugly, selfish, and completely lacking in justification, but honest. And the gaslighting, making me think I was confused and incompetent, because I knew that if you figured out what I was doing, I would lose everything. So I tried to make you doubt yourself instead of questioning me. It was cruel and cowardly, and I hate that I did it. We talked for 2 hours. Sarah cried, apologized, and accepted full responsibility for what she would done. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't ask to be welcomed back into the family, didn't ask for anything except the chance to tell me she was sorry. When she left, I felt emotionally drained, but also, strangely, at peace. Not because I was ready to have a relationship with her again. That would take years of consistent change from her, if it ever happened at all. But because I would gotten the acknowledgement I needed, the confirmation that I hadn't been crazy, hadn't overreacted, hadn't imagined the betrayal. Sarah had finally admitted what I would known all along. She would seen her elderly, disabled mother as an easy target, and she would exploited that vulnerability without a second thought. That evening, I called Emma to tell her about the conversation. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Relieved," I said. She finally told the truth. She didn't try to minimize what she did or blame it on circumstances. She admitted she felt entitled to my money and didn't care how she got it. "Are you going to have a relationship with her again?" I thought about it. Maybe, eventually, but it would have to be completely different from before. I would never trust her with my finances, never let her have access to my personal information, never rely on her for help when I am vulnerable. If she can accept those boundaries and prove she is genuinely changed, we might be able to have some kind of relationship. But it will never be the same. "I don't think I can do it," Emma said quietly. "I don't think I can forgive her for what she did to you." "That is okay, sweetheart. Forgiveness isn't required, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You get to decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with your mother. Don't let anyone pressure you into anything you are not ready for." Now, 3 years after Sarah's sentencing, I look back on this whole experience with a mixture of sadness and pride. Sadness that it happened at all, that my own daughter was capable of such betrayal, but pride that I found the strength to fight back, to refuse to be a victim, to demand accountability. I am 81 now, and I live exactly the life I want to live. I take watercolor classes on Tuesdays, volunteer at the senior center on Thursdays, and have dinner with Emma and her boyfriend most Sundays. Rick remarried last year, and his new wife is a lovely woman who treats me with genuine respect. Michael visits every few months and always tells me how proud he is of his badass grandma. Sarah and I exchange Christmas cards and birthday wishes. Nothing more. She is working as a clerk in a small office, living in a studio apartment, and according to Emma, seems to be slowly rebuilding her life. I hope she has learned from this experience. I hope she has become a better person. But her journey is her own now. Mine is just beginning, because I learned something important through all of this. Age doesn't make you vulnerable unless you let it. Being old doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment from anyone, including family. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to make sure they face the consequences of their actions. I kept every letter I received from other elderly people who found their courage through my story. They are in a box in my closet. And sometimes, when I am having a difficult day, I read them and remember that what happened to me wasn't just about me. It was about all of us who have been told we are too old, too weak, too confused to stand up for ourselves. We are not. We are warriors with decades of wisdom and nothing left to lose. And that makes us more dangerous than anyone could possibly imagine. So to anyone reading this who is facing something similar, document everything. Get legal help. And don't let anyone convince you that keeping the peace is more important than demanding justice. Family members who exploit your vulnerability don't deserve your protection. They deserve your consequences. And to the Sarahs of the world, the ones who look at elderly people and see easy targets, remember Dorothy Williams. Remember that your victim might have more fight in her than you bargained for. Remember that underestimating a woman like me is the biggest mistake you could ever make, because I didn't survive 8 decades of life, raise children, build a career, and bury a husband just to be stolen from by my own child. And at 81 years old, I am just getting started. Share your thoughts below about family loyalty versus accountability. When do you think it is appropriate to take legal action against family members? And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself, no matter what your age.